The Talk Station presents Faith Matters, a look at contemporary stories and issues from a faith perspective. While this is a pre-recorded show, we are interested in your ideas, comments, and questions, and we urge you to email them to faithmatters@thetalkstation.com.
Give me faith, trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life.
And now on the Talk Station, Faith Matters.
And welcome to our program for this week here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station. I'm Ben Ball, along with Reverend Robert Cornegie and Bishop Doc Loomis, and we're talking about faith in the news, the intersection of our culture and faith. And our first article that we want to speak, well, first of all, good day, gentlemen. Hope everyone.
Good to be here.
Good morning.
First article we want to talk about comes from lifenews.com. We're going to probably talk about a couple in this segment, but this is Illinois governor signs bill forcing Christian doctors and pregnancy centers to promote abortion. We've discussed similar legislation in the past. Abortion is now the official state-preferred choice for Illinois women in unexpected pregnancies after Governor Bruce Rauner, is that how you say his name, Rauner? Do you know? Signed the Senate Bill 1564 into law Friday afternoon. Rauner, a Republican, held veto power over the legislation, which Democrats pushed through on a strictly party-line vote and put on his desk May 31st, but he went against the grain of his own party in approving the legislation. And what this legislation does is that it means that, say, pregnancy counseling centers that would normally urge for adoption or for someone to not terminate the pregnancy must now offer abortion as one of the options they have, including the benefits of abortion. Do I have that right, Robert? That's what this is doing. So Robert, you've worked in this field and in the pro-life movement for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
This is startling, I think, for this governor to sign this.
Yeah, just historically.
Move up to your microphone, please. Remember
that.
Never mind. We do have one over there.
That was a long hello there.
All right. Try that again.
Okay. Yeah. You can tell I haven't done this in a while.
It's been a week or two.
Historically, the position has always been this code of conscience that has existed for obviously pastors and for pharmacists and for doctors and others that we have allowed them that sense of freedom of religion. We talk about this all the time, that our religion affects more than just our worship of God. Worship of God is one aspect of the freedom of religion. But the religion is to inhabit our vocation, every part of our lives. And so the state has always recognized that liberty. It's a liberty that we've been given not by the state, we've been given by God. That we stand before God, coram Deo. We stand before God, each one of us individually. And so this is that element of that. And now he has basically said that doesn't exist anymore, that the state has superseded the authority of God and is now determining what our conscience should do, and particularly in this area. And this is a huge mistake. And a lawyer friend of mine wrote me recently and responded to this, and he said his opinion was that this would not stand in court because this is so unconstitutional what he has done. He signed it, but this happens all the time. And another friend wrote recently speaking to this, and he quoted Lord Acton. And Lord Acton wrote, a British lord, who wrote a letter to Bishop Mandel Creighton, April the 5th, 1887. And you're probably familiar with one part of it in which he says, power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And he goes on. He says, great men, this is Lord Acton in this letter, great men are almost always bad men, even when they exercise influence and not authority. Still more when you superadd the tendency or the certainty of corruption by authority. There is no worse heresy than that the office sanctifies the holder of it. And that's a powerful statement that it does just the opposite. You know, we tend to think you get a person in a position of authority and they're going to rise and become honorable and all of that. And Lord Acton is saying, no, it's the opposite of that. What actually happens is the corruption takes place. And so what has happened is this gentleman, and we see this, political power corrupts, and he has corrupted an essential liberty of Americans, really of everybody, but I mean, because this is from God. It's not, this liberty, this code of conscience is from God. It's not from our governments.
This bill in Illinois does not require those who provide abortions to also speak of alternatives. It only requires those who wish to prevent them from do so. Doc, if we allow government to take this role of saying these are the only medical procedures or these are the only paths you can go down, then you brought us another article. This is in China. We could be headed in that direction of where the government may mandate exactly what you do with your with having children or not having children.
The speed with which this decision. Now, again, this is a House bill. This is a bill that passed through the legislature of Illinois.
Yeah.
The governor simply, with veto power, signed it. And what this law does is it basically it repeals in many instances what's called the Health Care Right of Conscience Act, which, from what I can tell, was passed back in the late 90s and was the gold standard for protecting medical professionals from having to do things that violated their conscience, religiously, morally, whatever. This basically says not so much, and then you've all accurately put down, or you've commented on how that will now look. It's not requiring a doctor to perform an abortion. It's simply requiring a doctor of a patient who's asking for an abortion to say, I can't do it, but this guy can. Bye-bye. See you later. So it's taking out that first line of defense against infanticide. Well, having said that, this is the first step, yes, to what has happened in China. China, notably since the 70s, has had a one-child law. That one-child law meant that the couples could only have one child, and it had to do with overpopulation. It had to do with an aging population. Now they have recently moved, I think as recently as a year or two ago, to a two-child law, which was much touted for its their liberals stance. And the story that came up recently, well, let me back up. Let me just say the speed of this is what I'm trying to get at. The speed with which the gold standard law of conscience is passed in Illinois in 1998, and by 2016, January 1st, has been completely dismantled. It's gone.
Right.
Just that fast. Some of the people that were in the House when it was passed in 98 were in the House when it was passed in 2015 for 2016 implementation. China, at least, they've been doing this for about 30, 40 years now. They've had this one-child law. But again, what we're beginning to see is the possibility that our country could head to where China's heading. We're going so fast in this directions of inclusivity and abortion that I really don't think we're but a generation or two out from the things that we as kids being raised, we looked at China and said, what? One child? What kind of a world? Who tells a family how many children to have?
Right.
We are running headlong into this thing. We are yes. I mean, I completely agree that this country left to its own devices is going to move much more. The more liberal you get, the more communist you get. Anybody have an argument with that? I mean, that's the reality of it.
Yeah, that's right.
And so the end of liberalism is communism. And the more inclusive and PC and liberal we get in this country, the more closely we're going to begin to resemble the communist nations that are already out there. Here we go. It's abortion. It's the state mandate. Wow.
Well, this has already happened in California. I mean, this was passed in California months ago. And so that the pregnancy centers had to even set up appointments in some cases for abortions. And so there's a big battle going on in California over this. There's going to be a big battle in Illinois over this. Let me just read what my attorney friend said, who is pretty balanced on these things. He said, "It is dangerous and repugnant whenever the government mandates any medical procedure for the general population. Religion considered, this stomps on the separation of church and state, as well as the doctor's freedom of religion, much less their freedom of speech. This won't be law for long," was his opinion. So now I wrote back and said, I wish I could share your opinion on that. But at the rate we're going right now.
But Robert, if the government mandated any other surgery,
Right.
anything,
Right.
hair transplants, colonoscopies, removal of the left foot, whatever that's called, if they mandated any other thing, sterilization, people would be up in arms. But when the government mandates abortion, folks just sit idly by and go, "Oh yeah, we'll pass it." What in the world is going on?
Yeah. Well, my prayer is folks won't sit idly by, that the church will respond to this. This is a God-granted right of conscience that we have. This is not the state.
It's a God-granted command.
Exactly.
I think he told us to go out and fill the world up.
This is the way we worship God, is in our relationship with him through our conscience and the moral code that he has given us. And it's alarming to see this happening. And you would, you kind of halfway expect it in China, an atheistic state. But here in America...
More to come in a moment here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station. Reverend Robert Cornegy and Bishop Doc Loomis, and I'm Ben Ball. We'll have more coming up in just a moment. Hey, welcome back here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And I'm Ben Ball, along with Reverend Robert Cornegy, Bishop Doc Loomis. And our next article that we want to talk about, kind of dovetailing really off of what we were just discussing, is from USA Today. And this is an Associated Press article. It says, Pope Francis has lamented that children are being taught at school that gender can be a choice, adding that his predecessor, Pope Benedict XVI, has labeled the current times the epic of sin against God the Creator. The headline was, Pope says it's terrible kids are taught they can choose gender. The article goes on to say Francis weighed in with his view on gender, and what was said was that the Emeritus Pontiff, while meeting privately last week with bishops from Poland during his pilgrimage there, the Vatican released the transcript Tuesday of those closed-door remarks. The Pope said he wanted to conclude his remarks by reflecting on this. We are living a moment of annihilation of man as image of God. I mean, what a powerful statement there.
Boom.
Yes.
Ben always takes all the good lines from the article. Did you notice that?
Yeah, we can repeat them. That's all right.
Well, it's Benedict, it's Ben, So this is though powerful stuff to be talking about. And now the relationship of Benedict and Francis, Pope 1, Pope 2 here is hard to sometimes separate in the article. But Doc, this is a powerful statement. It's one that is said with such incredulity that we have to take interest in this or pay attention to what's being said.
The epoch of sin against God the Creator, and we are living a moment of annihilation of man as the image of God. I had the privilege of doing a wedding this weekend. Hello, Braxton and Meredith. It was a wonderful wedding, and of course the teaching that we often do at wedding is about being one flesh. And we trace back to Genesis, and we talk about how it was that Adam's rib was removed and Eve was created there by his side, and that one fleshedness. And we talk about how one flesh comes about and how it comes into being, and how it is that there's the mystical union, and the mystical union it represents between Christ and the church. We talk all about one flesh. And just in 1 or 2 generations, we've seen that entire idea completely dismantled to the point where a man isn't a man anymore if he doesn't want to be a man, and a woman's not a woman anymore. And so the whole one-fleshedness thing that God created gets kind of all messed up, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And for a pope, I mean, you think of all the things the world's been through. I mean, from Nazi Germany, from Great Depressions around the globe, global illnesses, the Black Death. And it's this moment that causes this former pope to say, we're in the moment of the annihilation of man in the image of God. That is serious talk.
Mm-hmm. And we've all got to start talking that way, quite frankly. I mean, as a independent evangelical Christian, I resonate with what he said here, because I believe it's true. I believe that this has always been the effort of evil, is to destroy this incredibly gifted and special creation of humankind, of men and women, and the whole purpose of our existence before the fall was to be stewards and to fill the earth and to take care of creation. That's what our role was with God, in alliance with God, in intimate relationship with God. That was the original intent. And we've seen that completely wiped away.
Let me ask you about a couple of things we've talked about before. One is incrementalism. And then another popular catchphrase now is tipping point. And it does seem that if you trace back, you go back for some time, say even just to, as you said, a generation or two. Well, start with the free love movement of the 60s, et cetera, and on into today, is that we have seen the incrementalism reach a point where that boulder now is rolling downhill fast. It has enough weight on it that it is going at full speed. Yeah. When we watch the idea that children might be taught in school that they can choose their own gender.
Don't you love the word that Pope Francis used? Ideological colonizing.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
I mean, what we were kids reading about in civics and world history class, we read about the colonization favorably of the United States by Spain, by England, by the Dutch. But now what the Pope is saying, and of course he's not naming nations, but I think we all know who he's talking about. He's saying these ideological fantasies that places like the United States are having right now, they're now trying to colonize those around the world. They're implanting not people. It's not about, it's thinking about Donald Trump last night as I was reading this and thinking, if Donald Trump wants to build a wall, it's not to keep people out. We got to keep some of these ideas out. The world is being colonized by this kind of demonic liberalism. I'm sorry. It is what it is. The devil was in the garden. He started it by lying about life and eternity, and it has always been about life. And here we are again with the devil coming back, his ideology that you're not going to die. It's okay. He doesn't really mean what he says.
Let me put that comment in context here. Francis said today in schools they are teaching this to children. To children, that's his explanation point, that everyone can choose their gender. Without specifying, he blamed this on textbooks supplied by persons and institutions who donate money. I mean, this is follow the money idea. The Pope blamed what he called ideological colonizing, backed by very influential countries, which he didn't identify. One such colonization, he said, and I'll say it clearly, with its first and last name, is gender. And what again, powerful statement from these two pontiffs.
Well, and it goes back to everything basically we're talking about how our culture is changing, because we've lost contact with this idea of absolute truths, of universal truths. And so that truth is now whatever you think it is, whatever you feel it is, whatever emotion you have drives this concept of truth. So there are no absolutes anymore. God, the idea of a God who has a standard that exists for truth, for good. I mean, how, that's the argument about good and evil, is that you can't have evil without good, and you can't have good without God. And C.S. Lewis gave the illustration that the shadow proves the existence of the light.
Yes, right.
And so you can't, if you believe there is good and evil in the world, well, you have to have a standard by which to judge what is good and evil. And God is the source of that standard. Well, you eliminate God,
And we become the source.
then it's us. It's
And
our
we, and we
ideas.
change with every generation and wind that blows.
But
That's
also,
exactly-
let's look at, again, I want to talk about even incrementalism within the church, how we've seen little things. I've gone back and looked at, for example, I'll use from my own church, I'll use some things that are put out by the General Conference that include prayers. I go back through a series of them. Not one of them will mention God as Father. They'll say Creator God, different names there. Well, you go back and look at how Bibles even are translated now. You see Bibles. I'd love to read the beginnings of a Bible, not Genesis 1:1, but the preface where it talks about the translators and the work they do. But then you get to some that are being translated as for political correctness.
Correct.
And we're taking simple ideas that we all understood as boys and girls growing up to be not true any longer. And so this incrementalism creeps into even our churches. And it makes the idea of truth being, vacillating.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you destroy the concept that we were created in the image of God, which is what he's saying, is that we were a unique, special creation by God for a specific purpose he had, for a plan, and that history is going in a particular direction. Then you have uprooted that life, that plan.
And you've taken all the value that was God given away. And when you take the value away from the life, then you can kill the kid in the womb.
Correct.
Because life has no real value except how that life impacts mom and dad.
That's right. That's right.
And we'll go back again. My quote from the black policeman who was killed in Baton Rouge. His mother said, "It seems like no life matters." That's
right.
It's not about choosing a side here now. It's about choosing the null set, zero.
Yeah.
And
that's hard. I mean,
that's scary.
Edmund Burke said it best back in the 1800s. He said that for evil to triumph, the only thing that's necessary for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. And we're in that point, with this, the previous thing we talked about, the Illinois decision by the governor and all of that, how do you stop this momentum, right? That's what we're sensing. That's happening so fast. There's this momentum that's this wave, this tsunami that's coming on our culture. And how do you stop it?
Well, and to Ben's point, there does come a tipping point. Yeah. And at the tipping point is when most people stop. They give up. They say, you know what, right now I'm fighting.
Inevitable.
I'm fighting a losing battle.
Yeah, right.
It's inevitable. And when that happens, that's when that's when the sled starts racing down the hill. And I think we've passed that tipping point as a nation, and all we can do is pray that God has mercy on the remnant that continues to believe on him and continues to live according to his will and his word.
Yeah, well, we've seen a couple of instances where the wave has been pushed back. And,
well, I'm a fatalist. Okay, I mean, I've read the book. I know how it ends. It doesn't end
true.
well. It ends great. It ends. The final chapter is great, but until then, it gets pretty nasty.
Yeah. But there is something we can do, and I just, my hope is that God, through the work of His Spirit, is going to move on the people and accomplish what only He can accomplish.
A call for prayer and fasting is what that sounds like. We'll have more to come in just a moment here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And welcome back to Faith Matters here on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. Thanks for being with us here today. I'm Ben Ball, along with Bishop Doc Loomis and Reverend Robert Cornegie. And in our third segment here, we want to talk about an article that was in the New York Times, but it's an Associated Press article, and it's reprinted in a lot of different places. It's called "French Muslims Step Out of Invisibility After Attacks." French Muslims have been officially invisible, expected to blend in with the rest of the citizenry in secular France, but now they are speaking out and are being called to take on a larger role in combating the threat from Islamist extremists. The killing of a priest last week at his altar in Normandy, in his Normandy church, by two 19-year-old extremists has become a lightning rod for change. In an unusual joint statement published Sunday, a group of more than 40 Muslim lawyers, doctors, and other professionals said that French Muslims must move from the shadows to the front and center and take action because those representing Islam have lost touch with the young. It calls about an organization called the French Council for Muslim Faith, which has been the only authoritative way for French authorities to communicate with Muslim leaders because, well, frankly, there really are not Muslim leaders, right? I mean, they are not organized in that sort of Episcopal fashion. So that's been one of the difficulties. But what do you see? You know, we can see this as a positive move, but will it have any consequence? Is this a move that will strike any chords across moderate Muslims who have been invisible around the world? Robert?
That's a great question. I don't know. It's a little interesting, isn't it? It goes on. The article goes on and talks about how Muslims have been quiet, basically silent, because of they had been challenged to blend in with the secular French culture.
Well, French, they call themselves secular anyway, than the whole nation. So.
Yeah, and so religion is sort of tolerated on the fringes. And so, in other words, it's kind of where we're going. You know, we've always believed that we could live out our faith in the context of our culture.
In the public square.
And that was a good thing. Well, now the French have had a very different position on that. And so you sort of sublimated your religious ideas for this national Frenchness, they call it, to be French. And so now the Muslims are saying, hey, well, we were just being silent because you told us to. And you're calling us out now to do something. So, okay, we'll do something. But they're looking at it. I don't know if it's an immediate thing or a generational thing, because really what they're saying is we've lost touch with our youth. And so I have to admit, my opinion on this is somewhat influenced by a Pakistani friend who was raised Christian and had to flee Pakistan for his life. And he has recently written a book called Mirage. And he talks about Islam and this. It's a mirage. They put up a mirage about what they truly believe, and that they have standards within the Quran that allows them to be untruthful if they're defending to the advancement of the religion as a world religion.
Well, we've seen that from Palestinian political leaders. They tend to say one thing in a peace ceremony, and then accepting even a Nobel Peace Prize, and then say another thing to their people.
So there's just a little bit of a red flag flying for me on this one, that the French may be opening a can of worms here, and by we want the so-called moderate, peaceful Muslims to take responsibility within their own culture, their Islamic culture, to try to stop this. I think the question is, can they do it, or will they do it?
Willingness is a big if there,
yeah,
I think so. But the other side of this, I think the French secularist doc or the authorities are looking at this and saying, see, we can all get along. We can negotiate this out. I mean, if we have these guys, these 40 people who have signed this letter published in a big wide newspaper, isn't that great? Aren't we doing something about this?
Yeah.
I think France has realized that they are a nation under siege, and that siege is coming from radical Islamists who are from outside their country. At the same time, they recognize they have 5 million Muslims living in their country, and that if they can simply water that down, That is, if they can educate their imams in a uniquely French cultural Islam, then that will stand as a block solid against the incoming from out of. And actually, I don't think that's that horrible an idea. I don't like the idea that the government's getting involved with how faiths work, but that I think is their plan. Do you understand what I'm saying there?
Yeah.
Okay. So then I think the challenge with that is what you wind up doing is setting up an independent nation of Islam in your country, which will either arise and take you down, or on a good day, it will become the target for every jihadi outside your country, and the attacks in your country will actually go up, not come down.
But it'll be against that entity rather than
It will be
general.
it will be indiscriminate. They have already demonstrated the indiscriminates of it. Yeah. They're happy to attack their own, but if a state Islamic religion is created, starting with these 5 million people, if I'm telling you, the outside, the jihadis will say the French Muslims are infidels, and it's open target on every one of them.
Right.
I was watching a live stream from that outside of that church after it happened, and from a citizen's phone, and people are making comments. It's an app called Periscope, and people making comments to it, and over again, there were French people who were commenting, let us be armed. Let us have arms.
Let us defend ourselves.
Let us defend ourselves.
Right.
This was interesting. That was one of the comments. But there are others too that are not finding, as you were talking about in an earlier segment, truth in any of this. They're not finding that search for a desire for who really is God here.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a really important point that Doc made, that people, basically in the Middle East right now, the only nation that's benefiting from all that's going on out there is Israel. And that's because over 100,000 radical jihadist warriors, I'm being redundant there, have perished in the last 5 years rather than attacking Israel. And so, and you're seeing this. I mean, literally, what we're seeing is, in my opinion, is a civil war within Islam, and it's the
Shiites and Sunnis,
and the Sunnis, and they're this power struggle that's going on. The Sunni, Iraq and Syrian is ISIS. It's Sunni, and Iran is Shia. And it's a mess. And until a winner, the caliphate, however you say that, is established, it's just going to be the house of war. They are going to be in the house of war.
But they seem to be lashing out beyond those Sunni and Shia borders, though. I mean,
they are. That's right. They are. But you see that it's usually between those two groups. In Yemen, in Saudi Arabia, they've got that conflict going on. Mm-hmm. You've got the Kurdish conflict going on.
Yeah, but I actually take issue with what you said, because I don't think that the birth of the caliphate is the end of the battle. The birth of the caliphate is simply so that there is a nation from which to operate in order to bring about the conclusion of mankind. That is the point of this caliphate, right?
Right.
We've all acknowledged that the caliphate is designed to bring about the end of times, and then then the elevation and celebration.
So the
of all
Mahdi
those,
can come back.
Exactly that. Mm-hmm. So I don't really think that the caliphate itself is the end. I think the caliphate just goes on to the next thing. And the other challenge is really, yes, there's been a lot of Muslim death. 100,000 is the number you use. Mm-hmm. But if you look at the number of armed Muslim militia now compared to 20 years ago, it far exceeds 100,000.
Or even 10 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, we're in the tens of hundreds of thousands now.
I think it reminds me much more of a shark's teeth. One falls out, there's another one
in the row behind it.
Right.
Yeah, well, this article was actually an Israeli who wrote it, and he was saying that, as long as they're fighting each other, we're okay. We're not dropping our defenses or anything.
Yeah.
But they're kind of preoccupied now with this thing, and of course, part of the caliphate vision is to entice the West for that Armageddon battle that they believe in, where everything's going to break loose, and they're going to bring in they're tempting. Trying to get hooks in our
And France says, rise up Muslims and stand against the jihadis.
Right.
It's an early step. That's what
well,
I'm
we'll
thinking.
see how this works out.
Meanwhile, in Turkey, you have an attempted
goodness.
coup in Turkey that has everyone confused about where is the Muslim role here, because they'll do that kind of two-faced idea you were talking about. They'll say we're open for democracy and et cetera, but then they're shutting down the institutions and taking complete control.
I was talking to a friend who lived for a number of years in Turkey working in industry there, and he said, back when he was there, Erdogan, who is the president now, was in prison. And the military ran the country.
Right.
And he has reversed it.
We'll have more to come in a moment here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. Hey, welcome back to Faith Matters here on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And I'm Ben Ball, along with Bishop Doc Loomis and Reverend Robert Cornegy. In our final segment today, I want to take a look, revisit a subject, actually, that we have visited before. This time, it comes from a Christianity Today article that says, Goodbye God Gap. Trump and Clinton have churchgoers unusually split. Donald Trump seems to be breaking yet another political tradition this election, the God gap. In previous U.S. elections, polls consistently showed that a person's level of religiosity, I can't talk today, how important their faith is to them and how often they attend church was one of the biggest predictors of how they would vote. The more religious an American was, the more likely he or she was to vote Republican. The less religious, more likely to vote Democrat. But that correlation appears to be weakening enough that some are asking whether this year's unusual matchup between Trump and Hillary Clinton will be the end of what political scientists Robert Putnam and David Campbell termed the God gap. Now, it goes on with some stats, may get to some of that. But we talked before about how this seemed to be also kind of the amoral election, where neither candidate would or could claim the mantle of faith. And now we may be seeing the fruits of that if these polling numbers are true. Doc, I know you pay attention to this stuff. You don't like me coming to you first on this one, huh?
Oh, that's the first thing I do every morning is read the polling numbers.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. But what do you think of this idea? Is this now a up in the air election in terms of those who go to a church?
People are increasingly, there was a time as I was growing up, as we were growing up, there was a time when people were really platform or issue focused. We picked candidates based on how they felt about abortion, how they felt about free trade, etc. And while platforms are still being built underneath candidates, the reality is that we're getting back to some of the early American tradition of picking people and not parties. I hear that all the time. When I ask my friends, I say, what party are you going to vote? Well, I pick people. I don't pick a party. It's become it is even more now the popularity type contest. And when that happens, then things fall away. Things like conservative Christian values is not what we're looking for. We're looking for the person who can pull us out of the dire mess that people think that we're in, or we're looking for the person who can give us the most candy out of their bag. We're looking for our Santa Claus, whatever it is we want. So we have basically we've got a nation divided in two right now, not over the religious grounds. Typically, Republicans were Christian. Non-Christian or nominal Christians tended to be more Democratic, just in sheer numbers. That's not the case anymore. Now we're divided between the ones that want somebody to give them something and the ones that want somebody to protect them from something, or to be, two kind of daddy roles right now. So even though we've got a woman in place of one of the daddies. We're looking at who's your daddy, what kind of daddy do you want in this particular election.
Exactly.
Right?
I think so.
like that.
I think it's exactly right.
And so, and so, interestingly, for some people, and this fits right along with our gender identity. For some people, they want a daddy who's a mommy, and because Hillary's the first woman in our lifetime who has run for this office,
In a major party.
then for those people who say, well, the best thing, the daddy I want needs to be a mommy, then they're going to pick Hillary. So for the first time, this article says, gender trumps, sorry, it's not an endorsement, gender trumps religion as how people are divided over who their candidate is. I found that fascinating, didn't you?
Yeah, right.
Gender?
Well, that's what a number of my friends have come to me and said, I don't know what to do. I don't want to vote for either one of them. But I know that if I write in a name or if I vote for a third party candidate, they can't win, and it's setting up this terrible dilemma inside of them. And historically, what I would say when elections come around, as a pastor and trying to be nonpartisan as much as I can be, I'd say, well, look, just go to their websites, the national party websites, and compare their platforms, the planks in their platforms, and if you can't endorse either of the people, at least endorse the party that most closely reflects your worldview, the principles.
It takes a lot of work, Bob.
Yeah, and they look, and the answer I get back now is, I'm not feeling it. This is all about feelings. This is all about
feelings.
This is all about popularity, like you said. This is the the glamour role. We're mesmerized by these people.
Well, I said about some of the Bernie Sanders millennials, or the millennials in general. They were saying, "Well, I know that Trump will kick ISIS's butt, but Bernie will pay off my student loan.
Has more goodies."
So again, it is which daddy do you want here? Which kind do you want? Do you want the one that's going to pull out the belt?
Right.
And you're going to hear it coming out of the loops.
That's going to give you a job, or do you want one that's going to give you some goodies? Basically.
Well, the good news is that in a time of crisis in this country, we tend to vote for the hawk.
Yeah,
that's just the way it is. Or at the time of the conclusion of a crisis, take the end of the Civil War and Grant, take the end of World War II and Eisenhower. We tend to vote for the hawk because our minds are saying, who is going to make sure this doesn't happen again? Who's going to protect us? And we're still in a post 9/11 world.
Yeah, but there's a lot of media pressure out there. I was even listening to a talk show online today that says a lot of media pressure out there. It says this is it's all well and good. I mean, things are really much better than what they're saying on that side.
Yeah,
that around the world they love America, and that things are our military as strong as ever, and all these things that that many conservatives are denying to be the case.
Until you talk to a foreigner or somebody who serves in the U.S. military. Well, I mean, then you find out that's just not true.
Well, or particularly someone who has come from a socialist country and has fled to come to America, and they have lived the difference of the two regimes. And there are no simple answers this time. It really is a conundrum for a lot of people, and so
Yeah, but you still don't get to write an essay. You still have to punch a card.
That's exactly right. It's
have
binary.
to pick somebody.
You got it. Yeah, and so many people are going to be voting against rather than voting for.
Well, I think it will be significant. Will there be an undervote? Will there be people who don't vote?
That's what's going to happen.
Not even a question
on both sides.
I cannot tell you how many people I talk to that again they've just thrown up their hands and said, "I've given up. There's no point. I'm just not even going to go."
Yeah, and I think this may be strategic, politically, from the parties. From
who though?
Well,
see, I think
the lower the turnout, typically. Turnout is a huge factor.
I don't think there's anything typical.
And this is where the cooking of the books may be is in the whole turnout, all that.
It's a lot easier to do it in a lower turnout.
Yeah, exactly.
But the other side of that, though, another point about this is I think there are a lot of people who are not only that they're going to vote against somebody, but they are not going to vote at all. They might go to the polls, but not vote at the top of the tickets. That's called an undervote when they vote, but they don't vote for a particular office.
Right.
You'll see a lot of people who just don't want to make that decision.
So they'll vote the down line.
But Trump has to, it seems to me like he has to find a way to make friends. Make some friends out there because the media is going to do everything they can to show Hillary in the most positive light or actually show Trump in the most negative light.
But it's hard. I mean, imagine you're Donald Trump and you've just reached the nomination after receiving the largest number of votes in primary elections in the history of this nation. You've taken, how many, 37 states? Is that right? Am I guessing on that? Yeah. I mean, and so you've got the Newt Gingriches of the world coming to you and saying, hey, buddy, listen, let me tell you a little politics stuff. Trump is not an ideologue.
No,
I don't think he's going to listen to this stuff. Mm-hmm. I think he's going to sit in his big leather chair and go, wait a minute. I just went up and blabbered and scored. I tapped into something here. I am the daddy who's going to protect you. I'm the daddy that's going to keep the bad guy out of your bedroom at night.
Right.
And I just got the most votes in the history of American politics by saying that. I think I'm just going to keep saying that. And I think that's what he's going to do.
Now, is he still saying that, though? That's the question. Is he doing it? Is he
that's what he just did with the Attorney Khan's wife the other night. He slapped down Sharia one more time.
Well, it's just come out. He's just declared that he's going to put a stop to pornography. He's going to go after pornography. And so, I mean, he's throwing red meat to his base.
Fox and poll came out and just has Clinton ahead by 10 points.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's phenomenal. This is you can't say unprecedented, but it is.
I honestly don't think these polls mean a thing.
Yeah. No.
This is a poll about religion. You remember when Romney ran? Who did he run against? Oh yeah, do you remember what he ran? He had a 15-point lead among evangelicals, and Trump's got a 4% lead among evangelicals.
Yeah.
Did Romney win? No. I mean, I just don't think these polls mean a thing.
Mm-hmm.
If Trump jumped up to 15, he could lose just like Romney did. If anything this election has taught us is that elections change every 4 years.
Yeah.
And the way they're scored and the way that they're polled and the way that they turn out change all the time. This is the most significant change I've seen since Eisenhower. And I think this is going to be the most interesting election of my life. Mm-hmm. And that's why I'm voting for...
It's going to leave it there. It's going to leave that hanging there. Not that we don't know what that answer is. So. But thanks for joining us anyway.
Thank you for joining us for Faith Matters. Email your comments, questions, and suggestions to faithmatters@thetalkstation.com.
Give me faith, trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life. Give me faith.
Faith Matters is a production of The Talk Station.